and are refusing to reopen the case. Tim Samuels has been investigating.
Why a British student violently died on a German road remains a mystery.
To suddenly turn into a terrified young man who's running away 5 or 4 kilometers in the middle of the night, supposed to be running away, what causes that?
The student who died was Jewish. He died after getting involved with an extreme right-wing group in Germany.
When I speak with family members, how I was then at that time, they tell me you were like from a different planet.
The Germans say the case is closed. Others are less sure.
I don't know what happened to Jeremiah Duggan, but I think it is incompetence to not investigate what happened at that meeting further.
Wiesbaden, a small town south of Frankfurt, renowned within Germany for its therapeutic spa water. But 6 days after arriving in this tranquil town, a bright, popular student from London died in very odd circumstances.
Salut.
Qu'est-ce que tu penses de Biarritz?
Jeremiah, or Jerry Duggan, a 22-year-old student from North London. A former public school pupil, Jerry was academically gifted. Living in Paris, he was studying for 2 degrees at the British Institute and the Sorbonne.
He was somebody who had a zest for life, and he was very enthusiastic and loved literature and the arts and the theatre and music. He also enjoyed poetry very much, and I think he had a dream that he was going to be a writer.
He was somebody who had a fabulous career ahead of him, we felt, just by his attitude and his personality.
Last March, anti-war sentiment was running high in France. Jerry himself was deeply concerned by the prospect of war when he came across a group near the British Institute selling what appeared to be an anti-war newspaper, Nouvelle Solidarity. After a few meetings, they invited him to an anti-war conference in Germany. He decided to go along.
He said to me, I feel very strongly about it. And I said, well, if you feel so strongly about it, then you must do it. And you must go and protest. I didn't really know what was involved.
You know, while you're a student, these are the sort of world problems you try and solve, you know, seem natural to me.
Jerry headed to Wiesbaden, but this was no ordinary anti-war conference and no ordinary group that he'd unwittingly got involved with. The conference in a nearby town hall was being held by the Schiller Institute, a group inspired by Lyndon LaRouche and run by his wife.
And to build a larger and larger movement centered on a youth movement.
The latest offering in his perennial campaign to be president, his chances are less than slim as ever, not just because of his conviction for fraud, but something to do with his platform. Back on the campaign trail in the mid-80s, he told Newsnight the British royal family are global drug dealers. In relation to the Queen...
Of course she's pushing drugs. That is, in the sense of responsibility. The head of a gang that is pushing drugs, she knows it's happening and she isn't stopping it.
Yet LaRouche has built up a worldwide organisation with political parties, institutes, magazines, newspapers. Each promulgates his worldview, a view which those in the US monitoring far-right groups say is rooted in conspiracy theory.
The basic idea is that there's a core conspiracy that's destroying the world, and it has to be unmasked, and the followers of the one true leader are the only people who are being taught in a way that will allow them to confront this vast conspiracy.
The British are far more evil than Adolf Hitler.
Britain at the heart of a global conspiracy. It's tempting to dismiss Lyndon LaRouche as just wacky Americana, were it not for the fact that Jerry Duggan had been at one of his conferences just before he mysteriously died. For Jerry's parents in North London and his girlfriend in Paris, their last contact with Jerry was a series of phone calls whilst he was in Wiesbaden. He left for the conference on the Friday. On the Saturday night, it was his father's birthday.
But he just said, sorry, I can't be there, and, you know, it just sounded fine, so...
But something seemed to be changing in Jerry. When his girlfriend Maya spoke to him 3 days later, on the Tuesday, he said he'd learnt something very serious, but couldn't tell her what. Jerry then called her on the Thursday at 4 in the morning.
The first thing he said was he was under too much pressure. He was talking very quietly. He said that they were doing experiments on humans with computers. The way he spoke was very agitated. He couldn't string a sentence together properly. I asked him who was doing these experiments, and he said the government. He said that they were causing lots of pains to their arms and legs. I tried to find out where he was, but he wouldn't say.
An hour later, Jerry called his mother in London.
And he said, Mum, I'm in deep, deep trouble. Or he said, big trouble. I'm big trouble. And I said, tell me, Jerry, tell me, what is it, what is it? And he said, you know this Nouvelle Solidarité? And then, tell me. And he said, I can't do this, or I'm not able to do this, you know, I want it out. And at that point, the phone was cut. And then it rang back again almost immediately. And then the first thing that he said that time was, Mum, I'm frightened. I realised he was in such danger that I said to him, I love you. And then he said, I want to see you now. And I want to see you now. Now was important. And I said, well, where are you, Jerry? And he said, Wiesbaden. And I said, well, how do you spell it? And he said, W-I-E-S. And then the phone was cut.
45 minutes later, Jerry lay dead on the Berliner Strasse on the edge of Wiesbaden, fatally injured after running into traffic. He was hit by 2 cars. 10 minutes earlier, he'd collided with another car further down the road, but kept going. It begs the question, how had Jerry ended up running down a dual carriageway at 6 in the morning? According to the local police reports, he'd been staying with a member of the Schiller Institute in the centre of Wiesbaden, together with another student, Sebastian. Sebastian, who won't speak to the media, told the police Jerry had been restless that night and ran off from the house at 5:15 in the morning. If so, from the police report, it's assumed Jerry ran for 45 minutes, covering about 5 kilometres, before running into traffic. For the German authorities, a clear case of suicide.
We are
100% certain that it is suicide, suicide as we call it, that as a consequence of his own behaviour and with no one else involved, he threw himself in front of a car, of several cars, and died on the 3rd attempt.
In Paris, those who knew Jerry best, his friends, his girlfriend, the people that saw him all the time, to them, the idea that he'd commit suicide is inconceivable. Gregarious, full of life and ambition, Jerry was at the heart of their social group.
Do you like to fly kites? I love to fly kites.
One of the student watering holes where Jerry used to come with Peter, Ed and Jessie, friends studying at the British Institute.
He's somebody who I'd always seen as very stable, in fact, somebody who gave off all the outward signs of being extremely happy in the life that he had here in Paris. He was doing fine at school, he had a girlfriend, a massive group of friends both here and in London.
Nothing could be more implausible. Jeremiah was stable, he had so much going for him. It does make us feel very uneasy that there is this element of mystery that we can't really put the pieces together and that something just doesn't add up.
Something went on out there in Germany and it doesn't really fit. All the pieces of the puzzle don't fit together.
There was definitely something that happened to him that was very disturbing, and I think it's very important that we find out what that was.
Oh, that's so cool.
Pas du tout, non. Il était...
He wasn't the kind of person to take his own life. On the contrary, he had so many plans. He wanted to become a writer, to travel. He had no reason to kill himself. We got on so well together, and he had lots of friends in Paris. We partied a lot. He had no reason to take his own life.
Il aimait beaucoup faire la fête.
Critically, it's not just those close to Jerry who dismiss the German claim of suicide. A British coroner has rejected the suicide verdict, stating, "I could not accept the bold conclusion that Jeremiah Duggan intended to take his own life." He added that Jerry had been in a state of terror. These are not words usually used by a coroner's court, but no other words reflect Jeremiah's state of mind. For Jerry to have died in a state of terror when just days earlier he'd appeared happy and healthy throws the spotlight on the group whose conference he'd been at in Germany, the Schiller Institute. The testimony of a Metropolitan Police detective to the coroner is revealing. It does appear to be quite a sinister organisation. It did appear quite frightening, really, especially for impressionable young people. It's impossible to say what happened at the conference in Wiesbaden. No one will speak, not the Institute or others who attended. But Aglaia Bayes-Colliers may be able to shed some light, a member of the Schiller Institute for some 16 years. She left the group in the early 90s, but only now is willing to talk about her experiences.
People tend to be drawn into it who did not want to be drawn into it, who did not want to join a cult or a sect or something like that.
Such was the psychological duress, including so-called psycho sessions, that Aglaia recalls how she and others fell apart at conferences.
I was freaked out, and I experienced that other people freaked out. I saw people members who got out of their mind, yeah, who suddenly, one woman who suddenly painted only circles at the blackboard, yeah, and behaved like 2 years old.
What happened to Jerry at the conference, how he could have reacted, we simply don't know. But his mother feels that he might have been placed under additional pressure when it emerged he was Jewish. Just after his death, she says a member of the Schiller Institute told her that Jerry had stood up and declared his religion when challenging something being said at the conference. Here, an internal Met Police letter is instructive. The Schiller Institute and LaRouche youth movement blames the Jewish people for the Iraq War and all the other problems in the world. Jeremiah's lecture notes and bulletins showed the anti-Semitic nature of ideology.
Sometimes Jewish members were put under special pressure. For instance, when at public meeting, a person was picked out and publicly attacked. Your mother visited Israel, yeah, at a public meeting. I mean, why should not any mother visit Israel?
Those monitoring Lyndon LaRouche say he was more overtly anti-Semitic in the 70s, when he described Judaism as a half-religion.
The anti-Semitism in a meeting of the Schiller Institute would not be obvious at first. You would have to listen over time to a kind of set of patterns, and you would begin to hear the echoes of the classic anti-Semitic conspiracy theory in the way that Israel is talked about, in the way that Jews are talked about, in the way that the idea is put forward that the wars of America are somehow manipulated by Jewish lobbies and Israeli interests. And this really is an echo of the old classic anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. It's not that every criticism of Israel or American Jewish lobby groups is anti-Semitic, but over time this pattern emerges.
Erica Duggan remains plagued by the unanswered questions.
Yes, I think it's very important that we continue our common endeavors to bring some light into this terrible tragedy.
Sympathy from the German ambassador in London, but despite this and the real doubts expressed by the British coroner, over in Wiesbaden the authorities have not actually investigated the Schiller Institute or Jerry's time there. The case remains closed.
Under German law, we must only investigate if there is concrete evidence of third-party involvement in Mr. Duggan's death. We have no evidence whatsoever. As far as we know, the Schiller Institute has simply been mentioned because he attended an event there. But we don't know any more.
To turn a normal young man with his future in front of him and plans for the future and every kind of love for life, to suddenly turn into a terrified young man who's running away 5 or 4 kilometers in the middle of the night, supposed to be running away. What causes that? You can't just close the door on it and say it's suicide.
You know that we are not giving any comment. Okay, bye-bye.
No answers from the group that brought Jerry to Germany. Senior members of the Schiller Institute in Wiesbaden refused to speak. At their magazine offices, the secrecy prevails. For his part, Lyndon LaRouche called Jerry's death a hoax constructed by supporters of Tony Blair and Dick Cheney.
Report from Tim Samuels. Now, the White House was distinctly tested.